Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Find in this fellowship the help and friendship we have been privileged to enjoy. We who live or have lived with the problem of alcoholism understand, as perhaps few others can, we too were lonely and frustrated. But in Alanon, we discover that no situation is hopeless and that it is possible for us to find contentment and even happiness, whether the alcoholic is still drinking or not. We urge you to try our program. It has helped many of us find solutions that lead to serenity. So much depends on our own attitudes, and as we learn to place our problem in its true perspective, we find it loses its power to dominate our thoughts and our lives. The family situation is bound to improve as we apply the Alanon ideas. Without such spiritual help, living with an alcoholic is too much for most of us. Our thinking becomes distorted by trying to force solutions, and we become, does it have to be louder? You couldn't hear me? No? That's not what my kids say. Okay, our thinking becomes, oh, that's terrible, becomes distorted by trying to force solutions, and we become irritable and unreasonable without knowing it. Okay, the Alanon program is based on the 12 steps adapted from Alcoholics Anonymous, which we try little by little, one day at a time, to apply to our lives, along with our slogans and the Serenity Prayer. The loving interchange of help among members and daily reading of Alanon literature thus make us ready to receive the priceless gift of serenity. Anonymity is an important principle of the Alanon program. Everything that is said here in the speaker meeting, and member to member must be held in confidence. Only in this way can we feel free to say what is on our minds and hearts, for this is how we help one another in Alanon. Okay, I've asked Jane to read the 12 steps.
That's okay. My name's Jane. The 12 Steps Alanon. The Alanon family groups are a fellowship of relatives and friends of alcoholics who share their experience, strength, and hope in order to solve their common problems. We believe alcoholism is a family illness and that changed attitudes can aid recovery. Alanon is not allied with any sect, denomination, political entity, organization, or institution, does not engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any cause. There are no dues for membership. Alanon is self-supporting through its own voluntary contributions. Alanon has but one purpose, to help families of alcoholics. We do this by practicing the 12 steps, by welcoming and giving comfort to families of alcoholics, and by giving understanding and encouragement to the alcoholic. Because of their proven power and worth, AA's 12 steps have been adopted almost word for word by Alanon. They represent a way of life appealing to all people of goodwill, of any religious faith or of none. Note the power of the very words. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
Thank you, Jane. I forgot. Hi, I'm Joni. Hi, Joni. I forgot who I was. Okay, where's my notes? Okay, I've asked Sandy to read the 12 traditions.
Hi, my name is Sandy.
Hi, Sandy.
The traditions that follow bind us together in unity. They guide the groups in their solutions, in their relations with other groups, with AA and the outside world. They recommend group attitudes towards leadership, membership, money, property, public relations, and anonymity. The traditions evolved from the experience of AA groups in trying to solve their problems of living and working together. Alanon adopted these group guidelines and over the years has found them sound and wise. Although they are only suggestions, Alanon's unity and perhaps even its survival are dependent on adherence to these principles. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal progress for the greatest number depends upon unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. 3, the relatives of alcoholics, when gathered together for mutual aid, may call themselves an Alanon family group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. The only requirement for membership is that there be a problem of alcoholism in a relative or friend. 4, each group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting another group or Alanon or AA as a whole. 5, each Alanon family group has but one purpose, to help families of alcoholics. We do this by practicing the 12 steps of AA ourselves, by encouraging and understanding our alcoholic relatives, and by welcoming and giving comfort to families of alcoholics. 6, our family groups ought never endorse, finance, or lend our name to any outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary spiritual aim. Although a separate entity, we should always cooperate with Alcoholics Anonymous. 7, every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Al-Anon 12-step work should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, our groups as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, the Al-Anon family groups have no opinion on outside issues, hence our name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, films, and TV. We need guard with special care the anonymity of all AA members. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles above personalities.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, Holly, would you read Understanding Ourselves? Wait a minute now. I guess I forgot it. Sorry, I forgot that page.
Hi, I'm Holly.
Hi, Holly.
Understanding ourselves. Alcoholism is a family disease. Compulsive drinking affects the drinker, and it affects the drinker's relationship, friendships, employment, childhood, parenthood, love affairs, and marriages all suffer from the effects of alcoholism. Those special relationships in which a person is really close to an alcoholic are affected most, and we who care are the most caught up in the behavior of another person. We react to an alcoholic's behavior, seeing that the drinking is out of hand. We try to control it. We are ashamed of the public scenes, but try to handle it in private. It isn't long before we feel we are to blame and take on the hurts, the fears, and the guilt of the alcoholic. We too can become ill. Even well-meaning people often begin to count the number of drinks another person is having. We may pour expensive liquor down drains, search for the house for hidden bottles, or listen to the sound of opening cans. All our thinking becomes directed at the alcoholic, at what the alcoholic is doing or not doing, and how to get the drinker to stop drinking. This is our obsession. Watching fellow human beings slowly kill themselves with alcohol is painful. While alcoholics don't seem to worry about the bills, the job, the children, or the condition of their health, the people around them usually begin to worry. We often make the mistake of covering up. We try to fix everything, make excuses, tell little lies to mend the damaged relationships, and worry some more. This is our anxiety. Sooner or later, the alcoholic's behavior makes other people angry. As we realize that the alcoholic is telling lies, using us, and not taking care of responsibilities, we may begin to feel the alcoholic doesn't love us. We often want to strike back, punish, and make the alcoholic pay for the hurt and frustration caused by uncontrolled drinking. This is our anger. Sometimes those who are close to the alcoholic begin to pretend. We accept promises and trust the alcoholic. Each time there is a sober period, however brief, we want to believe the problem has gone away forever, when good sense tells us that something wrong with the alcoholic's drinking and thinking. We still hide how we feel and what we know. This is our denial. Perhaps the most severe damage to those of us who have shared some part of life with an alcoholic comes in the form of the nagging belief that we are somehow at fault. We may feel it's something we did or did not do, that we were not good enough, not attractive enough, or not clever enough to have solved this problem for the ones we love. There are our feelings of guilt. Do you want me to continue reading? Oh, really? Huh? I think that's it.
Oh, no.
You want me to read the one? Okay, yeah. Help and hope. We who have turned to Alanon have often done so in despair, unable to believe the possibility of change and unable to go on as we have before. We feel cheated out of a loving companion, overburdened with responsibilities, unwanted, unloved, and alone. There are even those of us who are arrogant, smug, self-righteous, and dominating. We come to Alanon, however, because we want and need help. We may have been driven to Alanon by the effects of someone else's drinking. We soon come to know that our own thinking has to change before we can make a new and successful approach to the living. It is in Alanon that we learn to deal with our obsession, our anxiety, our anger, and our denial, and our feelings of guilt. It is through the fellowship that we ease our emotional burdens by sharing our experience, strength, and hope with others. Little by little, we come to realize at our meetings that much of our discomfort comes from our attitudes. We begin to change these attitudes and learn about our responsibilities to ourselves. We discover feelings of self-worth and love, and we grow spiritually. The emphasis begins to be lifted from the alcoholic and placed where we do have some power over our own lives.
Thank you, Holly. Okay. Just a couple of things. First of all, I'd like to thank all the groups that put baskets together for the raffle. That was really very, very cool. AAs have asked us to read the Alanon anonymity statement. There may be some who are not familiar with our tradition of personal anonymity at the public level. If so, we respectfully ask that no Alanon or Alateen speaker or member be identified by full name or picture in published or broadcast reports of our meeting. The assurance of anonymity is essential to our efforts to help other families of alcoholics, and our tradition of anonymity reminds us that Alanon and Alateen principles come before personalities. Okay? Yay? Let's have it for that. Okay, so now we can introduce our beautiful speaker, Donna. She's a transplant from Ventura, and we claim her now, so we'd like to introduce her and have her come up and talk. Yay, Donna.
Hi, everybody. I'm Donna. Donna Newborn Hernandez. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. If I do this? Yeah. Okay, if I start backing up, just let me know, okay? As soon as she introduced me, my mind went blank. I forgot who I was, and I forgot what my story was. But I think it's coming back to me now. I've been around these rooms for quite a long time, and right off the top, I have to start with Alanon has saved my life. Not just my life, but the lives of others who may not still be here at my hand. I was born into a dysfunctional home to begin with. What a surprise. I know some of you can relate to dysfunction at home. And my memories as a child before the age of 8 were of domestic violence. My biological father used to make it pretty regular. He would beat my mom. He would try and suffocate her, and those were my childhood memories of him and her together. That was back in Brooklyn, where I was born. And you'll hear me say y'all sometimes, so I was born in southern Brooklyn. And when I was 8 years old, my mom decided that she had enough of that, and so we transplanted to the San Fernando Valley, where I continued out my childhood. It was fairly uneventful. I had an uncle that I was very close to. It was my mother's brother, Kenny, and he kind of stepped in where my biological father left off, actually where he never stepped before, and he was really instrumental in teaching me a lot as I was growing up, and he was my first alcoholic that I had contact with that I knew about. I remember as a child, he would have a party. There was always a party. When you're an alcoholic, anything's a reason to drink. And when he got really drunk, no matter who was around, he would say, "Excuse me," and take off his pants. And he would walk around in his boxers. So we always knew when he was a little tipsy because his pants would come off. And he was quite comfortable that way, and there were no incidents. So it was just accepted. This was my Uncle Kenny, and I loved him very much. He had 2 children with one of his wives. Marriage as a hobby seems to run in our family. He was married 4 times. I'm on my 4th marriage too, but I won't get too far ahead of myself. So he was married to my aunt, had 2 children. He got sober, and I don't remember who got him sober or how it happened, because I was pretty young at the time, but he had 13 years of sobriety when he passed away at the age of 45. So the disease, even though he had been sober for that long, it had still done the damage that it needed to do, because when you drink, it affects every organ in your body. And sometimes there's no recovering from that. So that was a big time for me, in my life, because I looked up to him so much, and I went with him to my first AA meeting. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. After my uncle passed, you know, life goes on. We learn how to live with the grief, and we move forward. And I was moving forward into a relationship with a man that I saw in a street fight. I said, oh my gosh, that guy is getting the crap kicked out of him. He needs me. And so off I went to find him after the fight. He was nursing his wounds in the bushes nearby. And from that night forward, I thought, this is my man. This is my man. Well, we got married, not that night, but shortly thereafter. And it turns out he had a drinking problem. I know, I was shocked too. We were married for 6 years. We have a beautiful, beautiful daughter who today is 36. Wow, I'm not old enough to have a 36-year-old daughter. She's 36 years old. But that marriage was, I call that my textbook, big book marriage, because he did everything it says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that you do before you get sober. He would disappear for days at a time, sometimes weeks at a time. He was very demanding as to how the household should be kept. He didn't want me to work because he didn't want me, I found out later, to find out that what was going on in our home wasn't the norm for everybody. So I stayed at home for 3 years and raised our daughter, and kept everything picture perfect the way he wanted it to be. And because of my previous experience with a dysfunctional family, I knew that I had to make everything look good on the outside. I was raised that way by my mother, and so I adopted that, and everybody thought we were just this wonderful, happy couple with a little child, and nobody really noticed that I didn't have any friends. I never left the house unless it was with him, or I was going to a relative's house and he knew where I was. They never noticed that my eyes were swollen so much from crying. I was just filled with fear and anxiety, and I wasn't even angry yet because I wasn't sure what to be angry at. I thought this is just how it's going to be, but something inside of me said this just isn't right. Well, that relationship eventually turned into physical violence, and I knew that that was wrong no matter what. So I said, that's it, I'm done with this. And he cried and he begged and he pleaded and I'll never do it again, I'll never yell at you, this'll, all the changes that we want to hear them say, those were all the promises he made me. That he would bring his paycheck home instead of drinking it with his friends, that he would take care of his daughter and myself, that he would be a good provider, a good father, a good husband. And I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Well, once it got physical, I said, that's it, and I left. But he continued to beg my forgiveness, and eventually I gave in. We got back together, and it was wonderful for about a day and a half. And what do you know? Things started happening again. He started disappearing again because that's the kind of drunk he was. He would go out with his buddies and, he would come home whenever it was. He would show up and I'd be at the door saying, "Where were you?" And he'd say, "How should I know?" Because he was a blackout drunk. So we went through that for a little while until I finally decided, enough was enough. And somebody that I met that I had known since childhood and hadn't seen for quite a long time, I met up with her, and she told me that I deserved something better in my life than that. And I thought, who's going to want me now? Because I had no self-worth. I didn't think anybody would want a single parent, to take on that responsibility. And where in the world was I going to meet somebody? I didn't do bars anymore. But I knew that that was not good for me, and that maybe there was a slight chance my friend was telling me the truth, and I did deserve something different. So I got out of that marriage, and I was a single mom Well, even when I was married to him, I felt like I was a single mom because he was never around. He just wasn't able to be. And my mother would tell me, he's just not capable of loving you the way you want to be loved. And Lordy, I don't know where that came from my sick, dysfunctional mother at that time, but she spoke the truth, that it's just he wasn't able to love me the way I had in my head that it should be. It wasn't his thing. So I went on and decided that the next alcoholic I met, I wanted to be ready for it. So I was going to take some classes on chemical dependency. And I was going to become a counselor. And the next one that came along, I was going to be prepared and fix them. It didn't work out quite that way. I met my next addict husband at a little apartment I was renting with my daughter. We became instant best friends. The first night we met, we sat up all night talking, and I knew this was the one for me. This was my dream come true. Finally had walked into my life. He loved my daughter loved him. He was kind, he was funny, he was there emotionally, physically, all the ways that my first husband was not there. This man was there for me. We dated for a few months, and we got married, and we were married for 8 months before he committed suicide. He was a drug addict, and although I never saw him use, I thought he had stopped, because he told me he had stopped, and I believed him. He didn't disappear for days at a time. There were none of the same behaviors as I had experienced previously. So I believed him, but apparently he started again, and he couldn't handle it, and I came home one day, and he was sitting on the bed, and I have never seen anybody looking so depressed in my life. And all he said was, "This is not what you signed up for. You don't deserve this." And I had no idea what he was talking about. I just know I became hysterical when he tried to leave. Now, my uncle, prior to his passing, of course, had mentioned something to me about Alanon. And so I thought, I wonder if that will work. If I start going to these meetings, maybe Larry will stay. And so I started going to Alanon. March 20th, 1987 was my first meeting. I was also attending school, so I brought my books with me so y'all would know that I wasn't really one of you. I was just here because it was a class requirement that I attend 12-step meetings. So that was March 20th, and I went to 2 meetings a week with my books, made it clear everywhere I went that it was because of school. And 10 days after I began, on March 30th, Larry committed suicide. That was a big turning point in my life. It wasn't as big of a turning point as looking back. You know, hindsight's always 20/20. Wished it would have been different, but it was what it was. And it took me many years to finally learn how to live with the grief of that, because when you have someone close to you that commits suicide, and especially behind this disease, well, there's always a disease if somebody's going to take those measures. You feel a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and I spent years racking my mind trying to figure out what I did wrong, how I could have saved him. You know, it was me. It was all me. I wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't clever enough to solve the problem for the one I love, as it says in our literature. And through going to Alanon, and I got a sponsor. Eventually, I quit going without my books. Eventually I went without my books. I'd never quit going. And I got a sponsor. Her name was Jean O, and she was from the San Fernando Valley in Reseda. And I asked her to sponsor me, told her what I was going through and what had happened, and she was wonderful. You know, she was there to listen to me. I'd call and cry to her on the phone. And mind you, at this point, I still really didn't have any close friends, but I was starting to feel like I fit in for the first time in my life in the rooms of Alanon. So for some miracle, I kept going back because I never felt like I belonged anywhere before. I was always, the black sheep, the misfit, and that included being with my family. And still sometimes I feel like I don't fit in with my family, but I always feel welcome in these rooms. So Larry passed away, and as I said, Alanon helped me through that, saved me, carried me through that. And this sponsor I had said, I think it's time for you to start working the steps. The steps? Oh my gosh. So I did steps 1, 2, and 3. And mostly we just talked about those things. I jotted down a few notes, but when we got to the 4th step, she said, it's time that you really write. And she explained to me how she did her 4th step, how you just try and remember as far back as you can. And if you think of somebody and you get that little twitch in your stomach, that little resentment twitch is what I call it, then their name needs to go on your 4th step. And so I thought, I don't really have any resentments. So I called her one day. I said, I think I'm done with my 4th step. Made an appointment, went to her house, walked in. She said, did you bring your 4th step? And I said, yes, it's in my purse. And I pulled out a little piece of paper with my paragraph written on it saying, I had some resentment for my parents, but now I forgive them. That was it. And she said, I'm really not going to do you any justice by accepting that as a 4th step. So we had some more talking to do. And you know what? I just wasn't ready. I was not ready to get that honest with myself and to look and see how many resentments I was harboring inside. And, I learned in these rooms, resentment is like taking poison and hoping the other person dies. And it's true, because even though I was going to meetings, I wasn't really working a program, and I was still slowly dying inside. But the good news was I never stopped going and started meeting people, and eventually they stuck, and became friends. We're still friends throughout the years. I relocated after the earthquake in 1991. Was that the big one? The big Northridge earthquake, 94? I relocated after that because the apartment I was living in, I could no longer live there. And so I relocated, and I ended up in Moore Park, out near Simi Valley in California, and I loved it out there. I always hated the San Fernando Valley, and it's nothing against anybody in particular. I just didn't feel comfortable there ever. I felt like I always had to look over my shoulder, and that's something you kind of feel like when you're in Alanon anyway, because something might be getting by without you getting your hand in it, without trying to fix it. So I relocated and started going to meetings in the Ventura County area, where I made a lot of friends and became very close with a pretty good-sized group of women that carried me through, the next several years of my life. While I was going to school, I met somebody. And he did not drink. He was a recovering addict. He did not use anymore. He went to meetings, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to school. I've got to be healthier, and I know I deserve better than what I've had. So I tried to rope him in, but we had a son together, a beautiful son. He's 25 years old today, and he's amazing. I love him with all my heart. And while I was pregnant, this person, he married somebody else. And I said, wait a minute, you see, I'm the one with the baby, what are you doing? So needless to say, that relationship didn't work out. But we did both love our son very much, and so did his bride at the time. They've been married for 25 years. And I came to love her a lot more than I loved him. She was wonderful to my son. She was very nice to me after we got to know each other. And she became a big part of my son's life because she was there. His father was very involved, and we cared a lot about how we were raising our son, and we wanted to keep both households, similar as far as discipline and rewards. And we went to counseling, the three of us. It was, my son's father, his wife, and myself. My husband at the time, that was husband number 3, I haven't got to yet, but I will. He didn't want to have any part of it. But we went to counseling. We learned how to co-parent together in a healthy way. And, to this day, I'm really grateful for that. My son still has issues, but that'll come later. And that can happen to anybody, I learned. It's not my fault. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it, and I can't control it. And I hate that. I just hate that. So we went on co-parenting, and in the meantime, while we were co-parenting, I had my son at a babysitter because I had to work. And there was this guy that would bring his little boy there. And I don't know what it was about him. He had long hair, but he had these little lines right here on his face when he smiled that were so cute. And he had blonde hair and green eyes. And then I found out he was a single dad. That's the one for me. That's the one I want. And I was in program for some time, at this point, but still not working as good a program as I think I should have been working. Had I been working a good program, I might not have made the choices I made. But in order to get to where I am today, I had to do those things. So I chased him until he caught me. And we got married, and we had custody of his little boy, and his little boy was 1 year to the day older than my son. 2 years to the day older than my son. They had the same birthday. My son was 1, and his son was 2. And so we became a happy little family until I came home one night. I was smelling around our apartment. I said, something stinks in here. Have you been smoking pot? And he admitted that he had. So I had enough program by then to know that I can't change it, I can't fix it. So I asked him, I said, well, I need to set some boundaries here. If you smoke it, I don't like it. I'm not condoning it, and I seriously hope you don't do it around me, but you cannot do it in the house, especially with these babies here. And my daughter also. So he started smoking his pot in the garage. And every time he went down to that garage, I thought, he's smoking. And it didn't matter where I was in the house or what I was doing, I would hear that garage door open, and I knew it. He's going to smoke. And for a while, all program escaped me, and I would run outside, and I was around the garage door going, sniffing. I can smell it. And I thought, well, now what? You can smell it. Big deal. What are you going to do about it? So I told him many times throughout our 10-year marriage that I didn't like what he was doing, and I wanted him to stop. And it was during that time in my program that I learned you can't set boundaries for somebody else. You can only set your own boundaries. And when you set your own boundaries to teach somebody how you want to be treated, it's not okay for you to say, you can't do this anymore. But what it's okay to say is, I'm very uncomfortable with this situation. I need to do what I need to do in order to make myself comfortable. I started working a much stronger program during that marriage, and he hated it. He hated when I went to meetings. Now, he was a musician, and he was frequently out playing at gigs that he would have, and I didn't really hate that so much because towards the end of the marriage, it was good to get him out of the house. But I learned how to say things to him during a fight, which we frequently engaged in fighting in front of our children. I didn't like that, but I didn't know how to stop it. But I learned little catchphrases in these rooms like, you may be right. Hold that thought. I have to go to the grocery store and get some milk for the morning. And just, little things like that I learned here that kept me from engaging in these big battles with him that were never ending, and nobody wins, and the only real people hurt in this would be the children, because they hear, even if you think they're in bed sleeping, they hear. And I know that because I grew up that way, and I remember hearing things with my parents, when I was younger, fighting and, physically fighting, and it was horrible. And somehow you take those things on, and it translated into I'm not enough. Once again, I'm not enough to make everything okay. There has to be something greater than me, or better than me. And I learned that was my higher power. I learned that in these rooms too, because as I grew up, my God, or my parents' God, was a punishing God. And if you do something wrong, God's going to see you, and God's going to get you for that. And, all my teenage years, I kept waiting for something to strike me because I wasn't a fun teenager. I got into a lot of trouble because I was trying to fit in somewhere. So the place where I fit in was with the crowd that was doing drugs. Because if you take enough drugs, you fit in anywhere, and it doesn't matter. I learned later on that I do have an addictive personality, but the drugs I was taking specifically for the purpose of being able to fit in and to help ease the pain of the dysfunction in my home, which as now I'm at my third marriage, and I continue that dysfunction in my home by participating in the arguments and the dysfunction that was just everywhere, like permeated the walls in my home. So I learned those little catchphrases. I started using those with him. He hated it. Christmas Eve, when I'd be decorating the Christmas tree with the kids while he was down in the garage, smoking or not smoking, I would get a phone call from somebody I was sponsoring, or I would feel the need to reach out and call someone, and he hated that. He'd come up from the garage and see me on the phone, and the kids sitting there and decorating the tree, and he'd say, "What are you doing? It's Christmas Eve." Yet, it didn't seem to bother him that he was missing out also when he left to go to the garage. Fortunately, at that time, I didn't feel a need to point that out to him, because I had tried things like that before, and somehow I just didn't get the reaction that I was hoping for him to say, "Oh my gosh, I could have had a V8." It didn't happen. And he continued to frequent that garage, and resenting my program. And I thought, God, he really hates this program. So I had a really nice, tight circle of friends. That was my support system at the time. And I got a bright idea to have a sisters meeting at my house once a month. He'll like that. Not. I started doing that. I had my sponsor, some of the people I sponsored, and some other people that she sponsored, and there was probably a group of a dozen of us that were there. I don't remember the night I had it on, but it was once a month, and everybody always showed up, and they brought food, and I swear when they left, my house was cleaner than when they came in. And I love that about Alanon. We learn to pick up after ourselves, and sometimes there's a bigger mess than we counted on. But these people would come over, and when they came over, he would disappear. He would go back into the bedroom. He never went to the garage when they were there. Never. But he would go to the bedroom. And I found out later that's because he didn't want to miss anything, because he had his ear up to that door to see what we were saying about him. And he was quite surprised when he didn't hear his name come up. So I went through that marriage. Like I said, it lasted about 10 years, and finally I just had a feeling that this wasn't it. This was not it for me. 10 years was enough of putting up with something that was unacceptable, which was his getting high, and then jumping in the car with the kids, which never occurred to me before. Oh my God, he's high and he's taking our kids, he's driving them wherever he would drive them, or I'm in the car with him and he's high. And that wasn't okay anymore. So I left that marriage, and unfortunately, his son that I had raised from age 3 to age 13, he chose to have our relationship severed, and I have not seen Kyle since then. That was very, very painful because, the kids don't do anything, and this kid has had mothers before me in and out of his little life. When he was 3 years old, he had already gone through his biological mother and another stepmother. And one thing I wanted to do was be there consistently for him, to show him that it's not his fault and that I love him anyway. And that he didn't do anything, to cause what was going on in our family. So, you stop me when I'm, you don't know, okay. Get comfortable. I wanted him to know that there was always going to be somebody there for him, something stable he could count on. And my ex-husband took that away, and unfortunately there was nothing I could do about it because I tried. It didn't matter that I had been his parent for 10 years, that I was the one that took care of him when he was sick, took him to the emergency hospital, did all the things mothers do. It didn't matter. So that was very sad, and it was also sad separating the boys because they had become so close. By this time, my then teenage daughter had had enough, and she went to live with her father, who at this point had joined AA and was sober and working a program, which was awesome. Although sometimes I have to say he's still an asshole. I don't know if he doesn't attend the meetings that prevent that or what it is, but he's not drinking, and I'm very grateful for that in his life and for my daughter, because since he's been sober, he's been able to step up to the plate a lot more and be there for her when she needed him to be there. And I realized I didn't have to be both mother and father anymore to her. And you can't do that anyway. You can't be mother and father. You can only be a mother or a father the best you can be of either one. You can't be two parents to your children. And I felt really bad for her. And yeah, I did some spoiling with her when she was growing up because I felt like I had to make up for her not having that father image, a healthy one, present in her life. So back to the end of the 10-year marriage and not being able to see my stepson anymore, I did try things like sending him notes to school. I'm here if you need me. Here's my phone number. Here's where I live. Call anytime. But he was in a place where he just wanted to please his father. He would have done anything. He would have cut off his arm to please his father because it wasn't easy to please his father, and when he did, it was a big deal for him. So I never heard from him again. I tried driving by where they were living. I tried everything, and then finally realized, you know what, maybe my higher power just thinks it's time to move on and to let them be and to quit stalking this child. It wasn't healthy, not for him, and definitely not for me and my son and my daughter. After that marriage, I decided I don't know how to do marriage anymore. I'm just going to stop. It's not a good hobby. I'm going to work my program. I'm going to learn more about who I am, and I did. I just jumped right into the program. By then, I was working the steps all the time, every day, depending on what issue came up, and I was in contact with my sponsor every day. And I started going to five or six meetings a week, whatever I could, and just soaking it all up. And after I got done for the second time working the steps, my sponsor said, "Hey, why don't you work the traditions?" I went, "That's like 24 steps. That's not fair." So she decided it would be a good idea if I did that. So I was willing to take direction, and I got to learn so much more about me and who I was and what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable in my home by working through those traditions. And I am so, so grateful that she encouraged me, that's what she did, to do that. I just learned so much. It's amazing. And I think my kids started seeing a change in me also. I know my daughter did, because she had mentioned at one point, you know, Mom, you're different. You're different somehow. I can't put my finger on it, but you're different. So I took it as a compliment. Don't know if she meant it that way or not. And I thought, you know, this is good. It's good I'm different. I was pretty bad because when I was upset carrying the burdens that somebody else should be carrying and trying to fix them and make them stop drinking and following them to bars and calling their friends on the phone to see if they knew where he was, my children were being neglected. I remember well sitting in my living room one day on the sofa, and I was just sitting there, and it was during one of his binges. This was back to husband number 1, and my daughter came in and said, Mommy, will you play with me? And I think she was 3 at the time, and I said, Mommy's busy. And she said, you're not busy, you're just sitting there. I said, oh no, Mommy's very busy. And what was going on was the committee, you know, in my head, still trying to figure out how to change it and how to make it better. Gratefully, after a few years of program, I was able to give my children more quality time and actually enjoy them, because I didn't know that they were here for me to enjoy. They were just little burdens that ran around, and, you know, I want this and I want that. And, you know, so did I. I wanted things too. You don't always get what you want. My daughter was already, you know, out of her preteen stage by the time this all evolved, but my son, who's 10 years younger than her, I was really grateful that I got a second chance, is how I looked at it, to raise another child, giving him my undivided attention. And I tried to do that to the best of my ability for my son and for my older daughter. And we don't do things perfect. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, things that I regret, but things that through the 12 steps I've had an opportunity to work through. I've been able to make amends to my children in the areas where I felt that I did them wrong. And I was able to forgive them for things that I felt they had done wrong to me. And it was the same with my family, you know, because before program, it was always somebody else's fault for my lot in life. And I learned to take that responsibility on myself. I took responsibility for my own actions and my own life once I started working a good Alanon program. Well, as I said, I decided after that marriage that that was it. I was done. Marriage wasn't for me. And I worked on myself for another 10 years. I bought a little house in Moore Park, and I thought my children were almost grown by then, and my son had gone to live with his father temporarily. So I bought a house, a 2-bedroom house. So I thought, yeah, it's just for me. I'll have an office in my bedroom. Perfect. I think out of the 10 years I lived there, I lived alone for maybe a month, because it was always one or the other of the kids. Hey, what are you doing with that bedroom these days? So they were in and out all the time. And you know, I'm grateful for that today, because I think sometimes it kept me on the straight and narrow as far as my thinking goes, because I had somebody else that I actually wanted to consider with the things that I did in my life and the decisions that I made. Well, 10 years went by, and like I said, I was real close to working the concepts, but escaped from that until this sponsor. But going back, I just kind of went to meetings, minded my own business, went to work, did what I was supposed to do, cleaned up my side of the street, and I was happier than I had ever been in my life. I had an active and healthy social life, personal life, family life. They hadn't changed, but I had. And it was just amazing, and I thought life doesn't get any better than this. And then I got laid off my job. And I said, but wait a minute, you know, we were laying off a lot of people. It's in 2009, a lot of people were getting laid off in a lot of places. And I thought, I'm really glad that I'm secure in my job. And the next thing I know, my boss says, we have to let you go. I said, no, not me, you need me. And spent a good 15, 20 minutes trying to convince him why he needed me. And the man looked up at me and his eyes were watering. He had tears in his eyes, and I felt bad for him. So Alanon went out the door, and I said, I'll get out of here as quickly as I possibly can for you, because I don't want you to have to suffer through this. And so I left, and a good friend of mine walked me out. She said, I'm not going to let you take that last walk out to your car by yourself. And she walked out with me, and she said, something better is coming your way, and your program tells you that, that. And I had a lot of faith. I applied for unemployment, and that wasn't really enough to live on, so I cashed out my 401k plan, and I thought, ooh, taxes are going to get me on that. And that happened later. And I just did the best I could. I lived one day at a time. I tried not to be frivolous. I was only able to give $1 at meetings, where usually I'd give a couple of dollars at each meeting. And I just put one foot in front of the other, as I was instructed to do by my Alanon sponsor and friends. Just take the next thing in front of you. And that's putting first things first. And I learned that here. And I'm really grateful, because my head could have gone to so many different places during that time. Well, I got the notice from unemployment that my employment was running out. And they gave me a date when I would receive my last check, and I received it, and I applied for more, and they gave me an extension. And the extension was running out. I could not find a job, and I ended up collecting unemployment for almost a year and a half. They kept extending my unemployment, which I was so grateful for. My 401k money, it wasn't enough to last as long as it should have, and I have a little problem in the shopping area. Used to, not anymore. And so it went a lot more quickly than it should have gone. And it would take an act of God, literally, for me to take money out of my savings to get something for myself. But when it came to my children or friends, give me that money, I'm buying this. And that was my problem, and I realized, I might have something else to work on in program, and indeed I did. So I kept getting extensions, and at the end of a year and a half, when they said, this is it, no more extensions, you're done, and I still didn't have a job or any leads, it was frustrating, because everything was being done online, so I couldn't present myself to anyone and try and sell myself. It was strictly about what was on the paper. So I got some help doing a really good resume, and some of the things on there were actually true. I did them. Some things were improvised, because I knew I could pick up on it just like that. And I had faith the whole time. I went to meetings, and people would come up to me, are you okay? And I was truly okay. Did it bother me a little bit? Yeah, a little bit, in the back of my mind. But I knew that my higher power, looking back, hindsight's always 20/20, he had never let me down all through my life up to that point. Why would he let me down now? And so I just continued living life, putting one foot in front of the other. And I believe it was a month or so before I received my last check. And somebody on Facebook looked me up. It was a childhood sweetheart I had, but he didn't know it. But we were good friends. We grew up together through our teenage years together, did a lot of drugs together. And he found me on Facebook, and it had been about 35 or 6 years since we had spoken with each other. He lived in Nevada. And he said, hey, I'm coming out for Christmas. My son lives in Palmdale. Can I come by and see you? I was like, yes, of course. And he came over, and I didn't feel like I had to chase him till he caught me. I didn't feel like I somehow had to trap him. I just truly was anxious to see an old friend. And when I did, I thought, wow, those drugs really took their toll. And I found out also that he had been in a horrible motorcycle accident in 2004, and he was lucky to be alive. He was in the hospital for 2.5 months. 2 of those months he was in a coma. And his wife, that he had been married to for 33 years, eventually passed away from that accident. They were on his Harley Davidson and a truck hit them, and they were standing still. So, you know, I felt horrible. I felt really horrible about that, and he's in constant pain, and he revealed to me all the medication he takes for this constant pain he has. And I thought, okay, you know, I'm still not scared, and in the meantime, I was starting to have feelings for this man. He worked for the Department of Water and Power, and he was just about to retire. And as the weeks went on, you know, we got really close, and I finally started having a little bit of anxiety about my money situation. And I didn't want to tell him, because the old me would have said something solely for the purpose of getting him to bail me out, to help me. And I didn't want to be that person anymore, you know, so I never said anything. But he noticed, you know, one day that I was a little anxious, and he asked me about it, and I didn't lie to him. And so he helped me. He said, it can just be a loan, you know, I'm going to pay your bills for the next 3 months. And by then you should be on your feet with a job. And yeah, I should be, but I wasn't. By that time, we figured we're both getting old. Let's just admit it. We're falling in love. And he said to me, you know, I have a piece of property, 2.5 acres out in Leona Valley, that I want to build a house on. And I said, where the hell is Leona Valley? And he took me there one day to show me, and it was the day, there's a lot of cherry picking goes on out there in Leona Valley, and the day that he brought me to see the property for the first time was a day of the cherry parade. And I looked around, I said, oh my God, this is Mayberry. And it was culture shock, you know, to come into this place after living in the city. And I thought that I really lived more in the country than the city in Moore Park, because my neighborhood was kind of secluded, you know, from other neighborhoods. And I thought that was really nice and quiet. Enter Leona Valley. I went and looked at the property. That's all well and good. And then he proposed. Not at the property. He waited until his children were all there, and they didn't know what was going to happen, and he proposed. And I didn't know what to say. I just looked at the kids' faces. He has 3 children. I have 2 children. I think that makes a brood when we're all together. I looked at their faces, and they were in shock. And his son pulled up a song on his phone, you know, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, and he was playing that in the background. They didn't know what to do, and I didn't either. So he opened up the box with the ring in it, and I went, yes! Although it really is not about the ring. But I said yes, because I truly did love this man, and I realized that I loved him for all the right reasons. It wasn't because I wanted to fix him. It wasn't because I thought he needed me. But, you know, we needed each other. We fill a void in each other's lives, and it balances out somehow between us. And he does not drink or use, other than his prescribed medication, anymore, but he also does not work a 12-step program. So he's, I call him my dry drunk. He has the behavior of an alcoholic, but let's face it, you know, we're Alanon, so we love alcoholics. You know, you never know what to expect next. And on the other hand, you never know what to expect next. So we got married September 29th, 2012. We had a little ceremony, and our families were there, and I was very, very happy. I felt really peaceful until he said, let's build the house. And I said, okay, so you want to take me from not only away from my friends, but my whole support system that I have built up for, you know, the last 20 some odd years out here in Ventura County, and you want to move me to Mayberry, where I don't know anybody. My neighbors are acres away. You know, I can barely see them, and there's no Target. There's no Target in Leona Valley. There's nothing in Leona Valley. We don't even have a stoplight. I think there's 3 stop signs altogether. But you have to go a distance. We have a little rancher's market. That's the market, post office, gas station. And we have a little salon that, thank goodness, they're wonderful people, and that's where I go now to get my stuff done. And I was in culture shock for a long time. I was very depressed. And I was driving out to my home meeting, which is in Westlake Village, a Wednesday afternoon at 12:45. I was driving out there every week because that was where my program was. That was where my home was. And there are no meetings in Leona Valley. And my husband, of all people, suggested I try one of the neighboring cities. Oh yeah, all these years of program, and that didn't occur to me. I was always spoiled and lived close to my meetings, and they were very plentiful and large. In fact, my home meeting, I think, had a few more people than what we have in here right now. And I loved it. And eventually the drive started to wear on me. It was an hour-and-a-half drive, not really that big a deal, but it took the whole day. It's 3 hours out of the day driving, and then an hour-and-a-half at the meeting, and another 45 minutes talking after the meeting. And by the time I got home, I was exhausted. And I realized, I need to find some meetings close to home. So I went to this little Wednesday afternoon meeting out in Saugus, Canyon Country. I don't know where the borders are for those cities. I get confused. And my first time, somebody asked me to be their sponsor. And I thought, okay, here we go. Now I have a reason to live, have a reason to go on and work a program. And I've been ever so grateful for her since, because she knew where there were good meetings, and I would go with her, because if I drive down Bouquet Canyon, it dumps me out in Saugus. If I drive over Goaty Hill, it takes me out here to Lancaster. I tried meetings in Palmdale, and all I'm going to say is I don't go there anymore for meetings. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. But I was really blessed to find a Saturday morning meeting in Saugus that was so much more like what I was used to. And I didn't want to be one of those people that came and said, well, at my meeting, this is how we did it. I really didn't want to do that, because each meeting is autonomous. And I'm grateful for that today. I'm very grateful for that today. So I found this wonderful Saturday morning meeting that I really have a hard time making it to, because I'm not an early bird anymore. I'm not used to getting up early, and frankly, I don't like to get up early anymore, and I'm retired and I can do what I want as long as I continue to work a program. So I found a meeting out here in Lancaster, a Thursday night meeting, and it's a newcomers meeting, and I loved it. And I went to a few more meetings on the other side of the hill, and I'm really looking forward to trying new meetings out this way and out in Canyon Country. And today, I've accepted that Leona Valley is where I live. I've gotten over the shock of, having to drive several miles to a Target or to any store, even to the grocery store. And I've learned to appreciate the beauty that surrounds me, and I learned those things in these rooms. I don't get upset over the little stuff anymore like I used to, because it takes so much out of me to get upset and to throw temper tantrums. Really, 5 minutes I did it? Wow. To throw temper tantrums because things aren't going my way. I don't do that anymore. I don't have to do that anymore. And I'm starting to build relationships with new people. It's not going to be the same as what I had before. It might be better. In fact, I know it will be, because it's already looking good, and we've been out here for 2.5 years. At home, it's just him and I in the house on a hill. And so I really need to find more meetings. Because now that we're both retired, 24/7, no matter how much you love somebody, is a little too much loving. And so I look for daytime meetings, and I'm learning to go to nighttime meetings, because I didn't want to drive at night. I can't see well at night, and I had to drive through a canyon no matter where I went out here. So I'm learning to appreciate what's going on in my life one day at a time. I'm looking at the things around me that are so beautiful, You know, I have a view from my house that people would kill for. I'm so blessed. And I looked at my husband the other day, yesterday actually. I was in the kitchen, in my gourmet kitchen, heating my microwave meal. And I told him, you know, thank you so much for this life that you helped provide for me. It was hard at first because I live by the steps and traditions, and the 7th tradition says we shall be fully self-supporting. And all of a sudden now I'm totally dependent on somebody else, you know, for my support. But I've come to learn, again, in these rooms and from talking to people with program, that it's okay. I do work too. You know, we have a big house and we do have a cleaning service every other week, but in between, you know, it's like my grandson says, Grammy lives in the dirt, and Grammy does, and there's a lot of dust all the time, you know, so I keep it up in between the housekeeper coming, and I cook and I do the laundry and I, you know, yada, yada, yada. I do all those things, and I'm very grateful that I get to do them where I get to do them. I miss my little house sometimes. Okay, a lot. I miss my little house. But God has something better in store for me, and He brought this man into my life for a reason. And this is the first time that I have been with somebody where I didn't feel like I needed to be in control or something was going to go terribly awry. He doesn't yell at me. He doesn't ever lift his hand to me. That shouldn't even have to be a consideration when you meet somebody and you start getting to know each other. Well, I want someone who doesn't beat me. And, you know, I'm grateful this man, he's wonderful. He gets on my last nerve a lot. But I have a program to reach out to, and he doesn't. And that's his choice, and that's okay with me today. Because whenever it's too much, I can go back to those little sayings that I used to use with my first or second or third husband, and say, you know, you might be right. I'll check on that. Thank you for your opinion. Now shut up, it says in my head. But I'm happily married today. It's a functional marriage. It's not dysfunctional. He uses a lot of medication, like I said before, but that's his deal and that's what he needs to do. Does it alter his personality? Absolutely. I love it when he takes those drugs. And, you know, it's just another way for me to remind myself I need to focus on me. You know, my side of the street, because I live in the dirt, tends to get dusty every once in a while. You know, got to work on keeping that side of the street clean. And as long as my focus is on me and my higher power, you know, where it belongs, I'm not so into what he's doing now. And I think that's really that's been a big blessing, because my other marriages, I wasn't so willing to look at my part. It was always what he done to me. I was always the victim. And through working the steps and traditions, I found that I had a part in those relationships that made them dysfunctional also. I'm the one that showed up all the time. I'm the one that said, it's okay to treat me this way, I'll still be here. And, you know, it goes on, but I don't want to do another 4th step up here. So, you know, I'm just so grateful to be where I am today. And when we moved here, I started praying. You know, after a while I thought, I'm getting lonely, you know, I miss my friends. And I started praying. I said, God, you know, please help me find a way to bring healthy people into my life up here in the boondocks. And the next thing you know, I think it was about a week after that, I got a phone call saying, hey, would you like to be the speaker at the luncheon at our convention in Lancaster? So be careful what you wish for. You can be more specific. But I'm so grateful for this, and I'm so grateful to have all of you here. Nobody got up and walked out during my speech, and I'm grateful for that. I don't see anybody falling asleep. But I really appreciate all of you. I look forward to getting to know all of you a lot better. And if you ever want to have an Alanon event, I'm just over the hill in Leona Valley. Let me know. And thank you so much for allowing me to share my story with you.
CDs will be ready in about 20 minutes. I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.